My name is Evelyn, and I can still see the satisfied expression on Jude's face as he thrust that paper toward me in the middle of our open office. We all signed this petition to have you removed, he announced with unmistakable pride, his voice carrying across the quiet workspace. Your methods are costing us money. 23 signatures filled that single page. Every analyst, coordinator, and manager in our department except me. The weight of their collective rejection pressed against my chest as colleagues pretended to work while watching my reaction. I took the paper with steady hands, scanned each name I'd greeted with coffee and smiles for 6 months, nodded once, and returned to my desk. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I picked up where I'd left off in my customer retention spreadsheet, the numbers blurring slightly as I calculated exactly how I would respond to this betrayal. Before I tell you what happened next, I would like to know if you've ever experienced that moment when everyone turns against you because they don't understand your vision. Because what I'm about to share isn't just about workplace drama, it's about standing alone when you know you're right. 6 months earlier, I had been transferred to lead the struggling analytics division at a mid-sized tech consulting firm. The division had been underperforming for years, stuck in outdated methodologies while our competitors raced ahead with innovative approaches. When the executive team announced my transfer from product development, I'd been excited for the challenge. We need fresh perspective, Imogen, our CEO, told me during a private meeting. The division's stagnating and the old guard isn't adapting. You have 9 months to turn it around before we consider restructuring entirely. That first morning, I arrived early, arranged welcome pastries in the break room, and prepared an introduction presentation outlining my background and initial observations. By 9:15, I realized something was wrong. The conference room remained half empty. Jude, the senior analyst who'd expected the leadership position himself, strolled in 20 minutes late with 4 other team members. Sorry, he said without making eye contact. We had an impromptu strategy meeting about the Eastland project. A meeting I hadn't been invited to, about our largest client. I smiled anyway. Perfect timing. I was just about to discuss my preliminary review of our current methodologies. Jude leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. We've refined these processes over a decade. They're industry standard. Industry standard 5 years ago, I corrected gently. Data analytics has evolved significantly since then. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Rowan, a data scientist who'd been with the company for 12 years, clicked his pen repeatedly. The previous leadership understood our clients' needs. I displayed a comparison chart I'd prepared. Our client retention rate has dropped 14% year over year for 3 consecutive years. Meanwhile, acquisition costs have increased by 23%. I paused, letting the numbers speak for themselves. Something needs to change. That afternoon, I found my office door had lost its nameplate. The next day, my login credentials mysteriously reset. Small things, annoying but not worth confronting anyone about. I focused instead on analyzing our processes and developing a comprehensive overhaul strategy. By week 2, I understood the fundamental problem. The division operated on quick-fix solutions that looked good in short-term reports but ultimately failed to address underlying client needs. They prioritized immediate metrics over sustainable growth. During my 3rd team meeting, I introduced my vision. We need to prioritize deep data mining over surface analytics. This means additional training hours for everyone and temporarily slowing our processes to rebuild them properly. Lyra, one of the few analysts who seemed receptive to new ideas, raised her hand. Won't that affect our quarterly numbers? Initially, yes, I acknowledged. But by quarter 3, we should see significant improvements that outweigh the temporary dip. Jude snorted. So you want us to sacrifice our performance bonuses for some theoretical future gain? I want us to stop putting band-aids on broken processes, I replied. The executive team understands this will require investment. After the meeting, whispers followed me down the hallway. When I entered the break room, conversations stopped abruptly. Emails circulated without including me. Documents I needed mysteriously went missing. I began documenting everything, keeping meticulous records of every email, meeting, and decision. I stayed late reviewing client histories, identifying patterns everyone else had missed. While they resisted my methods publicly, I noticed how they began implementing some of my suggestions with slight modifications, then taking credit during management reviews. The first monthly review was tense. Our numbers had indeed dipped as predicted. Jude seemed almost gleeful, presenting the downward trend without the context I'd provided in my preliminary reports. The new leadership approach is clearly not working, he concluded, looking directly at Bennett, our CFO. I waited until he finished before responding. As outlined in my implementation plan, we expected a temporary performance decrease while rebuilding our core analytics framework. However, our early indicators show client engagement up 12% where we've applied the new methodology. Bennett frowned. We need more than engagement. We need revenue. Revenue follows engagement with a 2-month lag, I explained. I've included the predictive models in my report. The following week, I discovered someone had altered my presentation slides before the management review. Key data points had been changed, making my projections appear overly optimistic. When I mentioned this to Imogen, she seemed concerned but distracted. Politics, she sighed. Navigate it carefully, Evelyn. You were brought in because you see things differently, but change is always met with resistance. 3 months in, I introduced my most ambitious proposal yet, a radical new customer retention strategy that required significant upfront investment but promised to dramatically improve our client relationships and long-term profitability. This is financial suicide, Jude declared during the division meeting. We can't afford to rebuild our entire client interaction framework mid-year. We can't afford not to, I countered. Our competitors are already implementing similar approaches. The opposition intensified after that meeting. Crucial emails went unanswered. I was accidentally excluded from strategy sessions. Someone replaced the data in my demonstration model with corrupted information the night before my presentation to potential clients, forcing me to rebuild everything from memory while appearing completely composed. Despite the obstacles, I began implementing pieces of my vision with the few team members who remained open-minded. Lyra proved particularly valuable, often staying late to help analyze results. They're scared, she told me one evening as we reviewed client feedback. Your approach threatens everything they've built their reputations on. I'm not trying to discredit anyone, I said. I just want us to succeed. Success looks different to different people, she replied. For them, it's maintaining the status quo where they're comfortable experts. Your success means admitting they've been doing it wrong. The whispers grew louder. Twice, I walked into the break room to find Jude and Rowan huddled with other team members, conversations abruptly shifting when I appeared. Performance reviews became increasingly critical, focusing on the temporary metrics decline while ignoring positive trend indicators. 4 months in, I received an email from a client complimenting our refreshing new approach to their data challenges. I forwarded it to the team, hoping to demonstrate the value of our changes. The next day, Rowan presented a modified version of my retention strategy during the team meeting, conveniently omitting that the core concepts came from my original proposal. This hybrid approach maintains our proven methodologies while incorporating select new elements, he explained, avoiding my gaze. I said nothing, instead documenting how they'd essentially repackaged my ideas with superficial changes. The pattern continued, public criticism of my leadership followed by private adoption of my strategies, carefully disguised as team innovations. 5 months into my tenure, the halfway point before Imogen's deadline, our numbers began to show subtle improvements. Client feedback scores increased, and early retention metrics showed promising trends. Rather than acknowledging these positive indicators, Jude focused on how we still lagged behind other divisions in raw quarterly projections. I continued my work methodically, meticulously tracking every metric and outcome. Late nights, weekends, I even worked through the spring holiday while others took time off. Slowly implementing my vision piece by piece, I built a comprehensive case study demonstrating the effectiveness of our new approach with our 5 largest clients. Then came the morning of the petition. I'd arrived early as usual, preparing for our weekly team meeting. Jude walked in with Rowan and 5 others, approaching my desk with that paper in hand and triumph in his eyes. We all signed this petition to have you removed, he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Your methods are costing us money. I scanned the document, recognizing all 23 signatures, every person in our department except me. Many wouldn't meet my eyes when I looked up. Others watched with barely concealed satisfaction. Thank you for sharing your concerns, I said calmly, handing the petition back. I'll be sure to address this with leadership. For the next 3 weeks, I endured knowing that everyone around me had formally requested my removal. Yet I continued building my case, finalizing my comprehensive report for the upcoming quarterly meeting where all division heads would present their results to the executive team. The night before the meeting, I stayed until midnight, quadruple checking every figure and projection. The data told a story even I found surprising. Our early indicators had underestimated the positive impact of our changes. The new methodology had created exponential rather than linear improvements once it reached critical implementation thresholds. The morning of the quarterly meeting arrived with a strange calm. I wore a deep green dress I'd purchased, specifically for this moment, professional yet distinctive. The boardroom filled with division heads and senior executives. Jude and Rowan attended as senior analysts, sitting as far from me as possible. Bennett, our CFO, began the presentations. Division after division reported modest gains, 8% here, 12% there. Solid, predictable results. Throughout these presentations, I noticed Jude watching me with barely concealed satisfaction, clearly anticipating my professional demise. Finally, Bennett reached our division. Analytics has been implementing significant methodology changes this quarter, he began, his tone neutral. Let's see the results. He displayed our financial results on the projection screen. An audible gasp filled the boardroom. Our division had outperformed all others by 340%. Customer retention had skyrocketed, while acquisition costs plummeted. The revenue projection graph showed a sharp upward trajectory unlike anything in the company's recent history. Bennett looked genuinely stunned. These numbers are extraordinary. Evelyn, would you care to explain how your division achieved this? I stood, walking to the front of the room with my tablet. 6 months ago, our division was struggling with outdated methodologies and declining client retention. We implemented a comprehensive overhaul focusing on deep data mining, predictive modeling, and client-centered analytics. The initial investment period created temporary performance dips, but as you can see, the long-term benefits have begun materializing ahead of schedule. The room remained silent as I detailed the specific changes and their impacts. Jude's expression transformed from smugness to disbelief to something approaching panic. Rowan studied his hands intensely. As I concluded, Imogen, our CEO, held up a familiar piece of paper. Before we move on, I'd like to address something brought to my attention. Apparently, there was a petition circulated to remove Evelyn from her leadership position. Her voice was measured but carried unmistakable disappointment. Who authorized this petition? 23 faces turned ashen. No one spoke. I see, Imogen continued after a painful silence. Evelyn, my apologies. It seems some of your team failed to appreciate your vision. The results speak for themselves. I nodded acknowledgement, maintaining my professional composure, while Jude stared fixedly at the table. Bennett cleared his throat. Given these exceptional results, I propose an immediate budget increase for the analytics division to further implement these innovations. The meeting continued, but the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer the outsider making unpopular changes. I was the visionary who had dramatically outperformed expectations. Afterward, Imogen asked me to stay behind. Impressive work, especially given the obvious resistance you faced. She smiled. We have several options to discuss regarding your future here. 2 days later, the executive team presented me with my choice of promotion paths. I could take an executive position, overseeing multiple divisions with significant salary increases and bonuses. I could remain leading analytics with expanded authority and resources, or I could create and lead a new cross-departmental innovation team with complete autonomy to select my own members. Most expected me to choose the executive track, the corner office, the prestige, the validation. Instead, I requested to create the innovation team. Are you certain? Bennett asked, clearly surprised. The executive position offers considerably higher compensation. I'm certain, I replied. The innovation team will allow me to implement transformative approaches across the entire company, not just one segment. Imogen studied me thoughtfully. And you want full authority to select your team members? Yes, I confirmed. The right people will be essential to our success. My request was approved the following day. The email announcement went company-wide, detailing my new role and the formation of the innovation team. The message included one key sentence. Team members will be personally selected by Evelyn based on demonstrated capabilities and potential. That afternoon, a knock on my new office door revealed Jude, looking uncomfortable but determined. Congratulations on your new position, he said stiffly. Thank you, I replied, gesturing for him to sit. What can I do for you? He shifted in his chair. I wanted to explain about the petition. We were concerned about the division's performance metrics. It wasn't personal. I let his words hang in the air for a moment. It felt personal when my presentation was altered before management review, when crucial emails went unanswered, when I was excluded from client meetings. His gaze dropped. There was resistance to change. Perhaps we acted impulsively. Perhaps, I agreed. I studied him for a moment. The innovation team will be implementing methodologies similar to what I introduced in analytics. It will require adaptability, open-mindedness, and collaboration. Hope flickered across his face. I have 12 years of experience in this industry. Experience is valuable when it's applied forward, not backward, I said. I'll be making my selections over the next 2 weeks. Thank you for stopping by. As he left, I returned to my list of potential team members. I had approached this decision methodically, reviewing performance records, adaptability metrics, and collaboration patterns. Some names surprised even me. The next morning, I sent my first invitation email to Lyra, who had shown genuine openness to new ideas despite pressure from her peers. Her acceptance came within minutes. Over the following days, I conducted individual meetings with every person who had signed the petition. To each, I said essentially the same thing. I'm building something extraordinary. Despite our past differences, I've observed capabilities in you that could contribute to this vision. Would you like to join me? Some, like Rowan, refused immediately out of pride. I prefer to remain in my current role where my expertise is established, he said stiffly. Others hesitated, suspicious of my motives. Why would you want me on your team after I signed that petition? Asked Tessa, a talented data visualizer. Because you're exceptionally skilled at translating complex data into accessible visuals, I replied honestly. And because I don't build teams based on personal grievances. By the end of 2 weeks, I had extended offers to 14 of the 23 petition signers. 8 accepted, joining Lyra on what was quickly becoming the most talked-about team in the company. Those who declined watched with increasing unease as my selective recruitment continued across other divisions, bringing in bright minds who hadn't been part of the petition drama. Jude was the last person I approached, 3 days before finalizing my team roster. Have you made your decision? I asked when he requested a second meeting. He squared his shoulders. I'd like to join your team. My experience would be valuable. Experience alone isn't what I'm looking for, I replied. This team requires humility, adaptability, and genuine collaboration. Everyone will rotate through different roles regardless of seniority. There are no special titles or privileges. Are you prepared for that? His expression tightened momentarily before he nodded. I believe I am. Then welcome aboard, I said, extending my hand. We start Monday. That first Monday revealed exactly what my former opponents had signed up for. I had transformed a large storage area into an open workspace with modular furniture, digital displays, and collaborative stations. No corner offices, no hierarchy reinforcing layouts. As team members arrived, they found their names on temporary desk assignments that would rotate weekly. Today, we establish our operating principles. I explained once everyone had settled. The innovation team exists to develop transformative approaches that can be implemented company-wide. We answer directly to the executive committee, but our success metrics differ from traditional divisions. I displayed our charter on the main screen. We'll be evaluated on implementation effectiveness, cross-divisional collaboration, and long-term impact metrics, not quarterly numbers. Jude raised his hand. So there's no immediate performance pressure? Quite the opposite, I corrected. There's intense performance pressure, but not the kind you're accustomed to. We need to demonstrate value through innovation that traditional metrics don't capture initially. That first week tested everyone. I instituted a first principles approach, requiring team members to question every assumption behind existing company processes. Those who had resisted my methods in analytics discovered why my approach had succeeded beneath the surface-level changes lay a fundamentally different way of understanding client needs and business value. Lyra thrived immediately, often leading discussion groups with infectious enthusiasm. Others struggled with the lack of hierarchy and established procedures. Jude particularly seemed to expect special treatment that never materialized. By week 3, clear patterns emerged. Those who embraced the new methodology began developing genuinely innovative approaches. Those who resisted found themselves increasingly isolated in discussions. I neither punished the resistant nor rewarded the adaptable. I simply created a transparent environment where results spoke for themselves. Midway through our second month, we presented our first major innovation to the executive committee, a client engagement framework that integrated predictive analytics with customized service delivery. The potential impact on client retention and revenue growth stunned the executives. "This is remarkable," Imogen said, reviewing the projection models. "How quickly can this be implemented?" "We've designed it for phased implementation," I explained. "The first module can roll out next month with minimal disruption." Bennett studied the financial projections. "These numbers seem almost too optimistic." "They're conservative, actually," I replied. "We've adjusted for implementation variables and adoption resistance." As we left the boardroom, Jude caught up to me in the hallway. "That went well," he said, walking alongside me. "The executive committee clearly appreciates our work." "Our work," I emphasized, "not any individuals. The framework succeeded because it integrated multiple perspectives." He hesitated before continuing. "I've been thinking about the analytics division. Our approach there was short-sighted." I stopped walking to face him directly. "Why do you think that happened?" His gaze dropped momentarily. "We were comfortable. Change threatened our expertise. It was easier to reject your ideas than adapt our thinking." "And now?" "Now I understand what you were trying to accomplish," he admitted. "Your methods weren't just different, they were better." I nodded acknowledgement but said nothing more as we returned to our workspace. His realization was meaningful, but I wasn't seeking apologies. I wanted transformed thinking. Over the following months, our innovation team produced one breakthrough after another. Each success amplified our influence within the company. Traditional divisions began requesting our input on their strategic initiatives. Our team members became sought-after internal consultants. Those who had joined me from analytics flourished in ways they hadn't imagined possible. Lyra developed a client prediction model that became standard company practice. Tessa created visualization tools that transformed how we communicated complex data to non-technical stakeholders. Even Jude, despite his initial resistance, eventually contributed valuable refinements to our implementation methodologies. Meanwhile, those who had declined my offer watched their careers stagnate. The analytics division continued implementing my original vision under new leadership, but those who had most vocally opposed me found themselves passed over for advancement opportunities. Not through any direct action on my part, their resistance to innovation had simply marked them as unwilling to adapt in a company now embracing change. Rowan requested a meeting 6 months after the innovation team formed. I welcomed him into the glass-walled conference room where our team's successes were displayed in real-time metrics on digital dashboards. "Impressive operation you've built," he said, his tone careful as he glanced around. "Thank you. What can I help you with?" He cleared his throat. "I've been considering a change in direction professionally. My position in analytics has become limited." "How so?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "The division has changed significantly. New methodologies, new leadership approaches." He shifted uncomfortably. "The skills that once made me valuable seem less relevant now." I nodded. Evolution is inevitable in any industry. Adaptation is a choice. I was wondering if there might be opportunities within your team, he finally said. I recognize I declined initially, but perhaps there's a role where my experience could be valuable. I studied him thoughtfully. The innovation team is fully staffed currently. However, we're establishing satellite groups in each division to help implement our frameworks. They require the same mindset we cultivate here: adaptability, collaboration, and forward thinking. Hope flickered across his face. I believe I could contribute in that capacity. Applications open next week, I said. I'd encourage you to apply through the standard process. Each candidate is evaluated on demonstrated capabilities, not past history. He nodded stiffly, clearly having expected a more direct invitation. I appreciate your consideration. As our innovation team's influence grew, so did interest in our methodologies from outside the company. Industry publications requested interviews. Competitors began mimicking our approaches. By our 1-year anniversary, we had transformed not just internal processes, but how the entire company positioned itself in the market. During our annual review, Imogen presented the financial impact of our innovations: a 42% increase in client retention, 28% growth in new business acquisition, and a remarkable 63% improvement in implementation efficiency across all divisions. The board has approved an expansion of your team and budget, she announced. You've created something truly transformative, Evelyn. After the meeting, Bennett pulled me aside. Several board members have suggested creating an executive vice president position to oversee innovation company-wide. You'd be the obvious choice. I appreciate the consideration, I replied. But I believe I'm most effective leading from within the innovation process, not above it. He studied me curiously. Most people would jump at such an opportunity. I'm not interested in titles, I explained. I'm interested in impact. That evening, as I reviewed applications for our satellite teams, I reflected on how completely the company culture had transformed in 18 months. The resistance I'd encountered initially had given way to widespread enthusiasm for innovation. The petition that once threatened my career had become a distant memory, though I kept a copy in my desk drawer as a reminder of how dramatically things could change. Among the applications was Rowan's, meticulously prepared and surprisingly humble in tone. He had completed 3 of our innovation methodology courses, voluntary training sessions we offered company-wide. His personal statement acknowledged his initial resistance to change and detailed what he had learned since. I approved his application for the analytics satellite team, where he would work under Lyra's leadership, a reversal that wasn't lost on either of them. 2 years after I first entered the struggling analytics division, our company had become an industry leader in innovative client solutions. Our stock price had doubled. Employee satisfaction scores reached record highs. The innovation team approach had spread throughout the organization, creating a culture where adaptability was valued above tradition. I began receiving offers from other companies, increasingly generous packages to replicate our success elsewhere. While flattering, none captured my interest until a venture capital firm approached with a different proposition. We're not looking to hire you, explained Naomi, the firm's founding partner. We want to fund you. Your own company, built around your innovation methodologies from the ground up. The proposition was compelling: complete freedom to create an organization that embodied my vision from its foundation, rather than transforming an existing structure. After careful consideration, I agreed to meet with their full partnership team. 3 months of discussions and planning followed. I shared my intentions with Imogen long before making any final decisions. I expected this day would come, she said with a sad smile. You've outgrown us. It's not about outgrowing, I corrected. It's about creating something designed for innovation from its inception, rather than retrofitting existing systems. The board will make a counter-offer, she warned. They'll match whatever compensation package you've been offered. It's not about money, I assured her. It's about building something without the constraints of established patterns. When I finally announced my decision to launch my own company, the reaction was mixed. The executive team expressed genuine regret while immediately beginning succession planning. My innovation team members showed both support and concern about their own futures. What happens to the team when you leave? Tessa asked during our group discussion. That depends on each of you, I replied. The innovation structure we've built will continue. Each of you has opportunities here. The foundation we've created isn't dependent on any single person. What I didn't share immediately was my longer-term vision. Once my new company established itself, I planned to build a team that reflected the collaborative, adaptive culture we'd created. I would need experienced innovators who understood my methodology. 2 weeks before my departure, I began individual conversations with select team members. To each, I said essentially the same thing. I'm building something extraordinary from the ground up. Your capabilities would be valuable in this new venture. There's a place for you when you're ready, but no pressure to leave immediately. I made no mass announcement, no general recruitment effort. Each conversation was private, based on specific qualities and potential I'd observed over our time working together. On my final day, the company hosted a farewell gathering. Speeches highlighted the transformation I'd led and the legacy I was leaving behind. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my message simple. Innovation isn't about technology or processes, I said. It's about perspective, seeing possibilities where others see only problems. Recognizing that resistance to change often masks fear rather than insight. And understanding that the most powerful impact comes not from forcing your vision on others, but creating an environment where they can discover it for themselves. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those who had once signed a petition demanding my removal. Some had become my strongest allies. Others had faded into corporate obscurity, clinging to outdated approaches. Each had chosen their path after I offered the same opportunity. My gratitude goes to everyone who challenged me, I continued. Your resistance forced me to refine my vision, strengthen my resolve, and develop more effective ways to implement change. Success is seldom achieved through agreement alone. 6 months later, my new company launched with innovative client solutions that quickly captured market attention. True to my word, I began selective recruitment of my former team members. Lyra joined first, bringing her boundless enthusiasm and creative problem-solving. Tessa followed 3 months later, eager to build new visualization systems without legacy constraints. Most surprising to many was Jude's arrival a year into our venture. He had remained at the original company, advancing to lead the expanded innovation team after proving himself among the most adaptable of my former opponents. Why leave now? I asked during his interview. You've achieved the position you originally wanted. Because I've learned that the position matters less than the vision, he replied. What you're building here is the future. I want to be part of that. 5 years after that humiliating day when Jude thrust the petition in my face, 13 former enemies had followed me to my new company. Several had become department heads. Others led specialized teams focused on their unique strengths. Each contributed to our rapidly growing reputation as industry innovators. The ultimate irony? Our original company became our biggest client, contracting with us to continue refreshing their innovation practices. During quarterly review meetings, I occasionally found myself in the same boardroom where I'd once defended my unconventional methods. Now executives from multiple companies gathered to learn our approach. Sometimes during these meetings, I would catch Jude's eye across the table, both of us remembering how differently things might have turned out had I responded to that petition with anger rather than strategic patience. Had I focused on punishing those who opposed me rather than creating opportunities for everyone to succeed. My most vindictive act wasn't firing those who undermined me or publicly humiliating them when proven right. It wasn't even building a competing company that overshadowed my former employer. My revenge was transformation, turning the people who tried to destroy me into my most loyal advocates by showing them a better version of themselves. On the 5th anniversary of my new company, we held a celebration dinner for all employees. As I looked around at familiar faces, many who had once signed that petition, I realized the true power of responding to rejection with opportunity rather than retaliation. Success is the best revenge, goes the saying. But I discovered something more profound. Success shared with those who once opposed you isn't revenge at all. It's redemption, for them and for yourself. The petition that once threatened to end my career now hangs framed in my office, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as evidence that the darkest professional moments can become catalysts for extraordinary growth when you refuse to let others define your worth. Have you ever faced opposition that seemed designed to destroy your confidence? Did you fight back directly or find another path forward? I'd love to hear how you handled your own professional challenges and what you learned from them. Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe for more authentic professional journeys. Remember that sometimes the people who try to tear you down become the foundation for building something far greater than you imagined possible. The lights overhead pulsed and swirled as I gripped the edge of my desk. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. My heart hammered against my ribs like it wanted to escape, and each breath felt like sucking air through a straw. Black spots danced in my vision as coworkers' faces swam before me. Astrid, are you okay? Someone touched my shoulder, but their voice sounded miles away. I tried to stand, to reassure them I was fine, but my legs betrayed me. The room tilted sideways as I crashed to the floor, knocking over stacks of purchase orders I'd stayed until midnight organizing. Papers scattered like frightened birds. The last thing I remembered was someone shouting for help as my body convulsed. I woke briefly in the ambulance, oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. The paramedic hovered above me, pressing buttons on equipment I couldn't identify. "We've contacted your emergency contact," she said. "Your boss, Mr. Preston." Through the haze of pain, I heard the radio crackle. The dispatcher's voice came through. "I have Mr. Preston on the line regarding employee Astrid Werner. Mr. Preston, your employee has suffered what appears to be a severe stress-induced collapse. We're transporting her to Memorial Hospital. As her emergency contact, we need... God..." His voice cut through, clear and cold. "She's just replaceable. Let her handle it." A pause. "I'm not paying for this." The paramedic's expression shifted from professional concern to personal disgust. She clicked off the radio and squeezed my hand, but I was already drifting back into darkness, those words burning into my brain. Replaceable. After 6 years of building his business from a struggling shop into the most successful kitchen supply company in 3 counties, replaceable. After canceling my mother's 70th birthday celebration to cover when his wife had insisted he attend their anniversary cruise, replaceable. After creating the custom kitchen design service that had tripled our revenue and made his name known to every restaurant owner within 100 miles, the hospital ceiling came into focus 3 hours later. The doctor's diagnosis hammered the final nail in my professional coffin: severe exhaustion, dangerously elevated blood pressure, and acute anxiety. "Your body is shutting down," she warned, writing on her clipboard. 2 weeks minimum recovery or you risk permanent damage." As they wheeled me to a room for overnight observation, I spotted Preston standing at the nurse's station, not checking on me, signing papers, refusing financial responsibility. When his eyes met mine, he simply turned away and walked toward the exit. I had no idea then that this moment of abandonment was just the beginning. I couldn't have known that in 14 days, I would return to find my entire life's work stolen, my position eliminated, and my future destroyed by the man I'd helped make rich. And I certainly had no way of knowing how completely I would dismantle everything he loved in return. If this story sounds familiar to you, if you've ever been tossed aside despite your dedication, then you understand this pain. Show support by hitting like, leave a comment about your experience with workplace betrayal, and subscribe to hear more stories of justice served. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. My name is Astrid Werner. Until that collapse, I was the general manager and chief buyer for Preston's Kitchen Emporium. Not the most glamorous title, but I'd built it into something that made me proud. I started as a part-time sales associate during college, studying business management while learning every aspect of commercial kitchen supply. By 24, I was running daily operations. By 27, I'd completely transformed a failing business into the premier culinary outfitter in the region. Preston had inherited the shop from his father, a man who'd built real relationships with local chefs. But Preston lacked both his father's charm and knowledge. What he did have was me, someone who lived and breathed kitchenware, who could explain the difference between German and Japanese steel to professional chefs, who remembered every restaurant owner's children's names and what grade they were in. I wasn't just a manager. I was the heart, brain, and soul of that business. My apartment was filled with cooking magazines and supplier catalogs. My phone constantly buzzed with texts from chefs asking for recommendations. I attended every food industry event, cultivating relationships that brought in exclusive contracts. I'd even learned enough Spanish to communicate with the back-of-house staff at our restaurant clients. My social life? Non-existent. Dating? A distant memory. Family events? Missed more often than attended. But I believed in what I was building. Preston's role mainly involved appearing at major sales meetings I'd arranged and taking credit for my innovations. He'd show up in expensive suits, shake hands, and tell stories about his vision, while I quietly ensured every detail was perfect. I tolerated this arrangement because I loved the work itself and the respect I'd earned within the industry. What made the betrayal so bitter wasn't just his words in the ambulance. It was what awaited me when I returned after my mandatory recovery. The morning I came back, something felt wrong immediately. My parking spot, unofficially mine for years, was occupied by a shiny new sports car. Inside, the store layout had been rearranged, destroying the careful flow I'd designed based on years of sales data. The specialty knife display I'd handcrafted with a local woodworker was gone, replaced by a garish prefabricated stand. When I reached my office, the door was open. The nameplate reading A. Werner, General Manager, had vanished. Inside sat a young man in his mid-20s, feet propped on my desk, talking loudly on the phone about golf scores. "Excuse me," I said, standing in the doorway with my return-to-work note clutched in my hand. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. With a dismissive gesture, he covered the phone. "Sales floor is that way. Staff isn't allowed in management offices." Before I could respond, my assistant Tilly appeared, her face a mask of discomfort. She pulled me away from the doorway. "Astrid, I'm so sorry," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Mr. Preston moved you to inventory. That's Dax. His son." "His son?" I repeated dumbly. "What son?" Preston never mentioned a son. "He's been away at college, or dropping out of colleges, from what I gather. Mr. Preston said you'd be handling inventory count in the basement while you recover." Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. The basement, where we stored excess stock and seasonal items. No windows, harsh lighting, concrete floors that ached after an hour of standing. Where we sent employees who couldn't handle customer interaction. "Where's my desk? My files? My computer?" My voice sounded strange, even to my own ears. "Dax has your computer. Your personal items are in a box by the time clock. Your files." She trailed off, then added in an even quieter voice, "Mr. Preston said most weren't necessary anymore. They're implementing a new system." I found Preston in the stockroom, examining a shipment of copper pans. He looked up as I approached, his expression carefully blank. "Welcome back," he said flatly. "Tilly, explain your new position?" "No," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. She couldn't explain something that makes absolutely no sense. "I built this department. I created the customer relationships. I developed the ordering systems. And you collapsed in front of our biggest restaurant client," he countered. "Proved yourself unreliable. My son needs real-world experience. This arrangement works for everyone. I collapsed because I worked myself to illness for your business." He shrugged, turning back to the copper pans. "Nobody asked you to. The counting room is waiting. We need the German knife shipment inventoried by lunch." As I turned to leave, he added casually, "Oh, and Astrid, the staff knows Dax is in charge now. Don't make this uncomfortable for everyone." The basement counting room was exactly as I'd feared, cold, damp, and isolated. My desk was a metal table with a clipboard. No computer, no phone. Just endless boxes to count, record, and restack. Through the ceiling, I could hear footsteps, conversations, the bell above the door announcing customers. My customers, the people I'd built relationships with for years. By midday, I heard raised voices upstairs. I recognized Chef Anton from the rustic table, our biggest restaurant account. His booming voice carried even through the floor. "What do you mean you don't have my order? Astrid confirmed it last month." Dax's smooth, practiced response was too quiet to make out clearly, but Anton's reply wasn't. 3 weeks until opening night, and you're telling me now? Where's Astrid? Put Astrid on the phone." Over the next 2 days, similar scenes played out repeatedly. Regular customers asking for me, confusion over orders, pricing disputes. Through snippets of conversation, I pieced together what was happening. Dax was blaming computer errors and previous management mistakes for his incompetence. On my third day in basement exile, Tilly snuck down during lunch. "It's chaos," she whispered, handing me a sandwich. "Dax has no idea what he's doing. He told Mrs. Bianchi that silicone spatulas can't go above 300 degrees. She nearly had a fit too. She's been baking professionally for 30 years. Why is Preston letting this happen? The business will suffer." Tilly glanced nervously at the stairs. "There's more. Preston's been coming in early, before anyone arrives. He's in your old office, with the door locked for hours. And Dax is telling everyone there we're structuring vendor relationships." That night, I couldn't sleep. Something deeper was happening. Preston was many things: arrogant, credit stealing, dismissive, but never stupid about money. He wouldn't risk client relationships unless something else was at stake. My opportunity came the next morning. Assigned to count a shipment of premium Japanese knives, I noticed oddities in the paperwork. The shipping manifest listed 36 8-piece sets, valued at over $300 each, but only 24 sets were in the delivery. I checked previous records. The pattern repeated across multiple high-end shipments, expensive items ordered and supposedly received, but significantly fewer actually in inventory, always with Preston personally signing the delivery confirmation. The pieces clicked into place. The business wasn't struggling because of my absence. It was struggling because inventory was vanishing. And with me relegated to the basement, Preston had eliminated the one person who would have noticed immediately. But why put his unqualified son in charge? The answer came during week 2 of my demotion. I overheard Dax on the phone, his voice echoing down the stairwell. "Dad's handling it. Yes, the audit is scheduled. No, nobody knows. Once the business sells, we're clear." They were selling the business, but not before skimming valuable inventory and blaming the resulting problems on mismanagement. With me out of the picture and Dax leaving a trail of customer service disasters, they could justify the declining performance to potential buyers. My heart raced as another realization hit. My collapse had been the perfect opportunity. They'd probably been planning this for months, waiting for the right moment to push me aside. That night, I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by industry magazines and catalogs I'd collected over years. Have resources for a career that had consumed my 20s and now lay in ruins. My phone, once constantly buzzing with client messages, sat silent. In 6 years, I'd missed family gatherings, ended relationships, and postponed my own dreams to build Preston's business. For what? To be discarded like yesterday's trash and blamed for their theft? The breaking point came during our annual kitchen showcase event. Every year, I coordinated a massive demonstration for our top clients, restaurants, culinary schools, catering companies. This year, despite my demotion, I was ordered to prepare all the materials but forbidden from attending. From my basement prison, I listened as Dax butchered my presentation to Granville Hospitality Group, an account worth nearly $200,000 annually. He mixed up orders, promised impossible delivery dates, and actually corrected their executive chef on knife techniques. The meeting ended with the client walking out. As I heard the door slam upstairs, something inside me snapped. The last thread holding together my professional composure broke. I wasn't just angry. I was incandescent with rage. That evening, instead of going home to my empty apartment to stare at the ceiling, I sat in my car and drafted a plan on the back of an old invoice. Not a complaint to labor authorities or a passive-aggressive resignation letter. No, something much more satisfying. The next morning, I arrived early and requested a meeting with both Preston and Dax. They exchanged suspicious glances when I entered the office, my former office. "I want to apologize," I said, surprising them both, "and offer my expertise to help train Dax properly." Their shock gave way to smug satisfaction. Preston leaned back in his chair, my chair. "That's very professional of you, Astrid. We could use your institutional knowledge during this transition period." Dax smirked. "I guess I could learn a few supplier names from you." "Exactly. I replied with a smile that made my face hurt. Why not extract everything useful from me before discarding me completely? If they caught the bitter edge in my voice, neither showed it. Preston actually laughed, mistaking my comment for self-deprecating humor, rather than the declaration of war it truly was. Starting today, I'll create proper training materials, I continued. I'll share my contact lists, explain our ordering systems, and teach Dax everything about the business. For 3 weeks, I became the model employee. I created detailed guides for each supplier relationship. I introduced Dax to key clients. I documented every process, appearing to transfer 6 years of knowledge. Meanwhile, I meticulously recorded every inventory discrepancy, photographed shipping logs, noted which expensive items arrived but never made it to the sales floor. I scheduled meetings with major suppliers to introduce Dax, deliberately booking overlapping appointments he couldn't possibly handle, all while gathering evidence of their plan to strip the business before selling it. What Preston and Dax didn't realize was that I wasn't just the store manager. I was the person every supplier trusted, every chef respected, and every competitor recognized. I hadn't spent 6 years building Preston's business. I'd spent 6 years building my reputation, and they were about to learn exactly what that was worth. The Regional Restaurant Association's annual meeting, our biggest sales opportunity of the year, was scheduled for Thursday. On Wednesday night, I stayed late, promising to finalize the presentation materials. Preston actually patted my shoulder as he left. I knew you'd come around, Astrid. Sometimes change is for the best. I waited until his car disappeared from the parking lot before I began. First, I removed every training document I'd created over the past 3 weeks from the shared drive. Then, I disconnected the backup system. I took the presentation materials I'd prepared, along with the custom order forms for our biggest clients. Finally, I opened the supply closet, where we kept promotional materials. Every business card, every brochure, every catalog that featured my direct contact information, I took them all. The next morning, I didn't show up for work. I turned off my phone as it began buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from Preston and Dax. Instead, I drove to the convention center, where the Restaurant Association meeting was being held. But I didn't go to the Preston's Kitchen Emporium booth. I had another destination in mind, one that would change everything. I entered through the service entrance, where caterers and event staff bustled about. Having coordinated our booth for 5 consecutive years, I knew every security guard and event organizer by name. They waved me through without question, another advantage Preston had never bothered to notice. The main exhibition hall buzzed with activity. Culinary professionals in chef whites mingled with restaurant owners and food service directors. These weren't just customers to me. They were people whose businesses I had helped build, whose kitchens I had helped design, whose staff I had trained on proper equipment use. From a distance, I spotted our booth, Preston's Kitchen Emporium, displayed in bold lettering across the backdrop I'd designed last year. Dax stood awkwardly beside it, already tugging at his collar despite the early hour. Preston paced nearby, checking his watch repeatedly, phone pressed to his ear. He was calling me, no doubt, wondering where his presentation materials were. I smiled and turned away. My destination lay elsewhere. 2 hours later, Preston's moment arrived. The association had scheduled him for the coveted mid-morning presentation slot, a 15-minute window to showcase new products to the entire assembled membership. I'd secured this opportunity 6 months earlier, through careful relationship building with the organizers. From my position at the back of the room, I watched Preston approach the podium, confidence plastered across his face. Dax trailed behind him, carrying an empty folder, the one that should have contained my meticulously prepared notes and product specifications. "Good morning, distinguished members," Preston began, his voice booming through the sound system. "Today, we at Preston's Kitchen Emporium are excited to announce our new line of professional-grade," he faltered, glancing at the projection screen behind him. The slideshow hadn't appeared, because it was on my laptop, sitting in my apartment. "Technical difficulties," he muttered. "While we resolve this, let me tell you about our exclusive importing partnership with..." He turned to Dax, who shrugged helplessly. Neither of them knew the names of our Japanese knife suppliers, information I deliberately withheld from my training materials. A chef in the third row raised his hand. Will you be continuing the custom kitchen design service? We're expanding next month. Preston's smile tightened. Absolutely. Our design team is restructuring for greater efficiency. Is Astrid here? Called another voice. She promised to bring specs for that new ventilation system. Astrid is pursuing other opportunities, Preston replied smoothly. But my son Dax is now heading our customer relations department and will be happy to assist you. All eyes turned to Dax, who stepped forward with artificial confidence. That's right, and we're, very excited about our new cooking things. The room fell silent. Then came the murmurs. Chefs and restaurant owners exchanged glances. Someone snickered. Chef Anton from the rustic table stood up. What happened to the custom ordering system Astrid promised? Our new location opens in 3 weeks. Dax blinked. I'm not familiar with any custom system, but I'm sure we can, It was finalized last month, Anton interrupted. Astrid showed me the prototype forms herself. Preston stepped in. We're reviewing all systems implemented by previous management. Some were not aligned with our business direction. Previous management? A woman called out. Astrid built your entire business. The room erupted in confused chatter. Preston tried desperately to regain control, but without my presentation materials, without knowledge of the products or client relationships, he floundered. His 15-minute slot dissolved into an embarrassing display of incompetence. That was my cue. I slipped out and made my way to the small conference room I'd reserved that morning. Inside waited the 20 most influential buyers in the region, all personally invited via text messages I'd sent from my private phone. Thank you for coming on such short notice, I said, closing the door behind me. I promised you an exclusive preview, and I intend to deliver. For the next 30 minutes, I presented the most comprehensive analysis of kitchen supply chain challenges the association had ever seen. I detailed supplier relationships, price fluctuations, import considerations, and custom solutions for each business represented in the room. As of today, I concluded, I'm establishing Werner Kitchen Consulting. My focus will be ensuring restaurants like yours receive exactly what you need, when you need it, from reputable suppliers with verifiable inventory. I emphasized that last part pointedly. But aren't you with Preston's? Asked a confused catering director. My position there has recently changed, I replied carefully, which has created an opportunity for me to serve you all more directly, without overhead constraints. I distributed business cards, not Preston's, but my own, printed overnight at a 24-hour shop. Simple, elegant, with my personal contact information. For those interested in discussing specific needs, I've prepared detailed proposals based on our previous conversations. I placed a stack of folders on the table, copies of client information I'd been collecting for years. Information that had never made it into Preston's official files because I'd kept it in my personal notes. By lunchtime, I'd scheduled meetings with 15 major accounts, not as a representative of Preston's Kitchen Emporium, but as an independent consultant who knew their businesses intimately. As I exited the conference room, I nearly collided with Preston himself. His face had turned an alarming shade of red, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me aside. "Where are the presentation materials? Where's the custom order book?" I removed his hand from my arm. I believe those materials fall under my intellectual property. I created them on my personal time, using my personal expertise. "You work for me," he spluttered. "Worked," I corrected. Past tense. "I'm submitting my resignation. Effective immediately." His eyes narrowed. "You think you can just walk away? After everything I've done for you?" The laugh that escaped me held no humor. "Everything you've done for me? Like abandoning me during a medical emergency? Like demoting me after 6 years of dedication? Like putting your unqualified son in my position while you systematically stripped inventory from the business?" His face paled. "What are you talking about?" "The missing knife shipments. The copper cookware that never made it to the sales floor. The specialty appliances signed for but never inventoried. Do you think I didn't notice?" You're making dangerous accusations, he whispered, looking around nervously. Based on nothing. Based on documentation I've been gathering for weeks, I countered. Every discrepancy, every missing item, every falsified receiving report. Behind him, I spotted Dax approaching, his expression thunderous. Preston held up a hand to stop him. Astrid. Preston's voice turned conciliatory. Let's discuss this privately. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone. I smiled. I've already made arrangements that benefit me, and all the clients you've been neglecting. Preston's demeanor changed instantly. The mask of reasonableness dropped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. You signed a non-compete agreement when I promoted you to manager, he said quietly. You can't simply take our clients. I reviewed that agreement during my recovery, I replied. It prevents me from working for competing retail establishments within 50 miles. It says nothing about independent consulting. His jaw clenched. No one will work with you. You have no capital, no storefront, no inventory. I have something more valuable. Trust, and knowledge of what you've been doing with that inventory. Before he could respond, Chef Anton approached, clapping a hand on my shoulder. Astrid, there you are. Your presentation was brilliant. When can you visit our new location to finalize the kitchen layout? I smiled warmly at Anton while Preston stood frozen beside me. I've got an opening tomorrow afternoon. Why don't we discuss it over lunch? As we walked away, I glanced back once. Preston and Dax stood motionless in the bustling convention center, two islands abandoned by the tide of industry relationships that had just shifted irrevocably in my favor. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Working from my apartment, I coordinated with suppliers I'd cultivated relationships with over years. Many were already suspicious about inconsistent orders from Preston's and welcomed direct communication with the person they'd always really dealt with anyway. I received a cease and desist letter from Preston's attorney, claiming I'd stolen proprietary information. My reply was simple: documentation of inventory discrepancies spanning 18 months. With an offer to share this information with the appropriate authorities if they pursued legal action. The letter was never mentioned again. Meanwhile, I watched from a distance as Preston's kitchen emporium began its slow collapse. Without my client relationships, without my product knowledge, without my systems, the business floundered. Dax quit after being publicly humiliated by Chef Anton over incorrect equipment specifications for his new restaurant. Specifications I had personally designed for the space. But the real satisfaction came 6 weeks after the convention. I was meeting with a restaurant supply manufacturer when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Local business owner under investigation for insurance fraud. The article detailed how Preston had been systematically reporting items as damaged or lost to insurance while actually selling them through unauthorized channels. The investigation had begun when several suppliers noticed discrepancies between what they shipped and what appeared on store shelves. What the article didn't mention, what no one knew except me, was who had compiled that initial evidence and anonymously submitted it to both the insurance company and the suppliers. By month 3, I had established Werner Kitchen Consulting in a small office downtown. My client list included nearly every major restaurant and catering service that had previously worked with Preston's. My reputation for honesty and expertise had only grown stronger through the contrast with Preston's public downfall. I received regular updates from Tilly, who now worked as my administrative assistant. Preston's kitchen emporium was hemorrhaging money. The restructuring had become a liquidation. The building was listed for sale. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, as I finalized kitchen plans for a new culinary school, my office door opened. Preston stood in the doorway, soaked from the downpour, looking 10 years older than he had 3 months earlier. Can I help you? I asked, my voice neutral despite the hammering of my heart. He stepped inside, water dripping onto my new carpet. His designer suit had been replaced by casual wear that hung loosely on his frame. You won, he said simply. The store closes next week. The legal fees have taken everything else. I set down my pen. I didn't do this to win, Preston. I did it because you left me no choice. By promoting my son? He asked incredulously. That justified destroying my life's work? No. By saying I was just replaceable when I was literally collapsing from overwork. By abandoning me during a medical emergency. by stealing from your own business while blaming others for the consequences. He flinched at each accusation. The business was failing, he admitted quietly. I needed the insurance money to keep it afloat until we could sell. Dax's position was meant to be temporary, just long enough to establish him as part of management for the sale. You could have told me the truth, I said. After 6 years, you owed me that much. He looked away. Would you have helped? I rebuilt that business from nothing once. I could have done it again. We sat in silence as rain pattered against the windows. Finally, he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. The liquidation company found this in the office safe. It belongs to you. He placed it on my desk and turned to leave. Preston, I called as he reached the door. He paused without turning around. I'm sorry it ended this way. He nodded once, then walked out of my office and my life. The envelope contained a faded photograph from the store's grand reopening 4 years earlier. Preston and I stood before the newly designed showroom, champagne glasses raised in celebration. On the back, in Preston's handwriting, couldn't have done it without you. Too little, too late. As I placed the photograph in my desk drawer, my phone chimed with a notification. Chef Anton's new restaurant had been selected as one of the top 10 openings of the year. The article specifically mentioned the innovative kitchen design. MI design. Sometimes the most effective revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about reclaiming what was always rightfully yours. Your value, your expertise, your future. Preston had called me replaceable, but in the end, he was the one who couldn't be replaced, because he'd never actually been essential in the first place. I had been the heart of that business all along. Now I was the heart of my own. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like and share. Your support helps stories like Astrid's reach others who might be facing similar workplace struggles. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? Share your experience in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about resilience, redemption, and the sweet satisfaction of rising from the ashes stronger than before. The text message made my hand go numb. I had to read it 3 times before the words registered. Sorry, can't make it to your award ceremony tonight. Something came up. 8 hours before the biggest night of my career. 8 hours before I was supposed to walk across that stage as the youngest architect ever nominated for the Innovation Award. I stood in my apartment, halfway dressed in the midnight blue gown I'd spent 2 months' rent on, staring at my phone. Porter had promised to accompany me as my mentor. He'd insisted on it. An achievement like this deserves proper recognition, he'd said just last week, clapping me on the shoulder. I'll be there to introduce you to everyone who matters. My fingers hovered over the screen, typing and deleting responses. What was I supposed to say? That it was fine? That 3 years of working 16-hour days, of pouring my soul into revolutionary designs while fighting to be taken seriously, culminating in this nomination, meant so little he could bail with a text? Before I could respond, another message lit up my screen, not from Porter, but from Tess in accounting, a group photo from what looked like a party. There was Porter, grinning widely, arm thrown around Darian's shoulders, my colleague, the man who'd spent every day since I joined the firm trying to undermine me. In the background hung a banner, "Congratulations on your promotion." My stomach hollowed out. The glass of celebration wine I'd been nursing slipped from my fingers, splashing red across the cream carpet. I barely noticed. Darian got promoted, and Porter, my mentor, the man who was supposed to champion my career, chose his party over my award ceremony. I zoomed in on the picture, noting the expensive wine bottles, the catered food, the 20-some colleagues all gathered in Darian's sleek new apartment, the apartment he'd spent months talking about, scheduling the housewarming deliberately for tonight. Such a shame it conflicts with your little award thing, he'd said last week, voice dripping with fake sympathy. I'm sure some people will still come to yours. I'd thought it was just Darian being Darian. I hadn't imagined Porter would choose sides so blatantly. My phone pinged again. A private message from Tess. I'm so sorry, Nira. I thought you knew. Darian's taking over the hospital expansion project. Your project. The room tilted sideways. The hospital expansion was my design, my vision, the project that had earned me the award nomination. I'd created an entirely new approach to healing spaces, gardens that grew through the building itself, light channels that shifted with patients' recovery cycles, structural elements that breathed with the environment. I sank onto my bed, still half-dressed, as another message came through. A photo from Darian's sleek glass dining table. Spread across it were renderings, my designs, with tiny alterations. I called Porter. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Same result. The clock ticked forward. The ceremony started in 2 hours. I could stay home, let them win, or I could go alone and hold my head high. 20 minutes later, I stepped out of a car at the convention center, my dress fully zipped, my eyes clear. If I had to accept this award alone, so be it. The ceremony glittered with industry elites. I found my assigned seat, toward the front where nominees sat. People nodded politely, but few stopped to chat. Without Porter to introduce me, I was just another young face in a room of established powers. The Innovation Award celebrates architectural vision that transforms how we experience space, the presenter announced. I straightened in my seat. This was my category, my moment, for revolutionary healthcare design concepts that reimagine healing environments. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my fingertips. The award goes to Anton Meyer of Summit Design. The room disappeared into a tunnel of noise. Anton Meyer? Who was Anton Meyer? A tall man in his 50s strode confidently to the stage. Behind him, projected on the massive screen, were designs. Designs with garden elements growing through structural walls. Designs with light channels that shifted throughout recovery spaces. My designs. As Anton began his acceptance speech, he gestured to the audience. I'd like to thank my exceptional consultant who provided invaluable guidance on the core concepts. The spotlight swung to illuminate someone standing and waving in acknowledgement. Darian. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Somehow, my revolutionary designs had found their way to another firm, and Darian knew exactly how they'd gotten there. Wait! Before I continue this shocking story, if you're feeling that twist in your gut right now, you know this is just getting started. Hit that like button if you've ever been betrayed, subscribe to catch the fallout, and drop a comment about what you think Nira should do next. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when this architect decides to draft her own revenge. My name is Nira Kwan, and until that night, I'd believed that exceptional work would always speak for itself. I'd grown up watching my father craft furniture in his workshop, turning raw materials into functional art. He'd taught me that creation was sacred, that building something from nothing was the closest humans came to magic. Architecture was my way of making magic on a grand scale. At 32, I'd already developed a reputation for unconventional approaches, while other architects at our firm created efficient but predictable structures. I designed buildings that conversed with their environments, that changed with the seasons, and responded to the people inside them. I joined Porter's firm fresh out of graduate school. Not the most prestigious offer I'd received, but Porter had promised creative freedom. I recognized something special in your work, he'd said during my interview. Something that can't be taught. For the first year, he'd been true to his word. He assigned me to smaller projects but gave me room to experiment. Clients responded enthusiastically to my designs, and slowly, I earned larger commissions. Then Darian arrived. He transferred from a competitor firm with an impressive portfolio and immediately set his sights on establishing dominance. 10 years older than me with conventional good looks and an education from all the right schools, Darian navigated office politics with practiced ease. Interesting concept, he'd say during my presentations, voice smooth as silk. Though perhaps too conceptual for actual construction, clients ultimately want reliability, not experiments. Yet clients kept choosing my experiments. Each success seemed to fuel his resentment. He began scheduling client meetings when I couldn't attend. Subtle comments about my youth and inexperience peppered conversations with partners. Work I'd submitted for review would return with fundamental changes. Darian was concerned about structural integrity, Porter would explain. He's just looking out for the firm. I adapted, worked harder, documented everything. And Porter, caught between his recognition of my talent and Darian's relentless campaigning, tried to appease both of us. The turning point came with the Children's Hospital redesign. The original building was 50 years old, a concrete block with narrow windows and cramped rooms. The board wanted something revolutionary that would transform the healing experience. I threw myself into research, speaking with doctors, patients, and families. I studied how nature affects recovery rates, how light influences mood, how spatial flow impacts stress levels. For 6 months, I worked weekends and nights, developing a design unlike anything in modern healthcare. My proposal featured gardens that grew not just around but through the building, with patient rooms opening onto green spaces at every floor. Light channels followed the sun's path, directing natural illumination through recovery areas based on circadian rhythms. The structural elements themselves curved and expanded, creating spaces that felt like sheltering trees rather than confining rooms. When I presented to the board, the room fell silent. Then the questions began, thoughtful, engaged questions about implementation and maintenance. By the end, they were leaning forward in their seats. "This isn't just a building," the hospital director said. "This is a completely new understanding of healing spaces." I didn't know then that Darian had been developing his own hospital proposal for months. When both our projects went before the final review committee, mine was selected unanimously. That evening, Porter took me to dinner. "This deserves industry recognition," he said. "I'm nominating you for the Innovation Award. No one has approached healthcare design this way before." 2 months later came the nomination announcement, the youngest architect ever considered. Porter promised to be by my side at the ceremony, to introduce me to the industry elite. "This is just the beginning," he assured me. What I didn't know was that Darian had already begun his campaign against me. Private lunches with Porter, where he questioned whether my designs could scale for larger projects. Suggestions that I lacked the experience for serious client management. Hints that I would eventually leave for a competitor, taking clients with me. And somehow, during this campaign, my designs for the hospital began appearing elsewhere. First, in small elements in other firms' work, then in more substantial ways, until finally, they appeared almost entirely intact in Anton Meyer's award-winning project. The morning after the ceremony, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The hallways were silent except for the quiet shuffling of the cleaning crew. A gray-haired woman was emptying trash bins near Porter's office. "Quite a gathering last night," she said, noticing me. "Had to clean up before everyone arrives. Your boss left papers everywhere. Not very careful with important documents, is he?" I thanked her absently and continued to my desk, turning on my computer to find an email from the awards committee. "We regret to inform you that your nomination was withdrawn by your sponsoring mentor 3 days prior to the ceremony." Porter had pulled my nomination, not just failed to attend, actively withdrawn it. But why? The answer began revealing itself over the following weeks. My projects were reassigned one by one. Porter avoided direct conversation during meetings. Darian received the promotion to Senior Design Director, taking over client relationships I had built over 3 years. "Your work is too specialized," Porter finally told me during a brief, uncomfortable meeting. "The firm is moving in a different direction, toward more commercially viable designs." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral while everything inside me burned. That evening, I stayed late, waiting until the office emptied. The same cleaning woman appeared in the doorway of my office. "Working late?" she asked, emptying my trash. "Just finishing some things," I replied. Then, carefully, "I've been meaning to ask, when you cleaned Porter's office after the party, did you happen to see any designs for the Children's Hospital project? My project?" Her hand paused on the trash bin. "The ones with the garden patterns growing through the building?" "Yes. I saw copies on his desk marked for someone at another firm. Seemed strange since those looked just like your drawings from the recycling bin." She placed something on my desk, a crumpled sticky note with a phone number and the name Anton Meyer. "People don't notice cleaning staff," she said quietly. "They talk like we're invisible. They leave things out like we can't read." Her eyes met mine, sharp and clear. Some of us read very well indeed. The next morning, I requested a meeting with the entire board of directors. Porter looked confused when he saw me waiting in the conference room. "I thought we settled your transition," he said, straightening his tie. We did, I replied, but I wanted to personally introduce my replacement. The door opened. The board members filed in, followed by the CEO of our largest client, and behind them, the cleaning woman, now dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit, her gray hair pulled back in a sleek bun, Porter's face drained of color. "This is Imogen Reed," I said calmly, "former head of the State Architectural Licensing Board. She's been working undercover, investigating ethics violations in major firms for the past 6 months." The room fell completely silent. "She's also my mother's oldest friend," I added, "and she noticed some interesting things while emptying your trash, Porter." "What is this?" Porter stammered, looking between me and Imogen. "This is accountability," Imogen replied, placing a small drive on the conference table. While cleaning, I discovered communications detailing how Ms. Kwan's designs were sent to competitors with minor modifications, how her award nomination was withdrawn after she refused certain advances, how Mr. Darian's promotion came with promises to board members about future contracts with their private interests. Porter attempted to speak, but the client's CEO raised his hand. When Nira contacted me with her concerns, I asked Imogen to look into this firm's practices. The CEO said, "What she found goes beyond one stolen design. It appears to be systematic exploitation of junior designers, particularly women." The board chairman cleared his throat. "These are serious allegations." "With serious evidence," Imogen replied, gesturing toward the drive, "including recordings from the party where certain individuals were quite forthcoming about their methods after a few drinks." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Porter's eyes darted between the board members, searching for allies, finding none. "These recordings were obtained illegally," Darian said, recovering faster than Porter. "A cleaning person eavesdropping? That would never hold up." "I wasn't just a cleaning person," Imogen interrupted. "I was an investigator with full authorization from the State Licensing Board, following up on multiple ethics complaints against this firm. My employment here was completely legal, as was my collection of evidence that was in plain sight." She turned to the board, including emails sent to Anton Meyer with Ms. Kwan's original designs, communications about withdrawing her award nomination, and discussions of how to push her out without triggering a discrimination lawsuit. The client's CEO leaned forward. "My company invested millions in what we believed was a groundbreaking hospital design. We chose this firm specifically because of Nira's presentation. If her work was then stolen and sold elsewhere while we were left with a watered-down version, that's absurd," Porter finally managed. "Nira's a talented young designer, but she's clearly spinning a narrative to explain her career setbacks. Designs evolve, ideas overlap. Nothing was stolen." I removed my tablet from my bag and placed it on the table. 6 months ago, I began watermarking all my digital files with an invisible signature. I also embedded unique elements in each design iteration, small details that serve no functional purpose except to identify my work. I opened a file showing side-by-side comparisons of my hospital designs and Anton Meyer's award-winning project. I highlighted one section after another: identical waterways, identical light channels, even identical bench placements in garden areas. Then I zoomed in on tiny details: a pattern of tiles that spelled my niece's name in code, a series of curves that matched my father's furniture signature. "These aren't coincidences or parallel evolution," I said. "These are my designs stolen and sold." "This is preposterous," Darian snapped. "Porter, are you going to let her?" The board chairman held up his hand. "Mr. Porter, Mr. Darian, I suggest you both remain silent until legal counsel arrives. Ms. Reed, is there more?" Imogen nodded. "Extensive documentation of sexual harassment against female employees, kickback arrangements with contractors, and billing irregularities that would interest the IRS. But most relevant to today's discussion," she produced a flash drive, "are communications between Mr. Porter, Mr. Darian, and Anton Meyer regarding the sale of Ms. Kwan's designs." The CEO stood abruptly. "I've heard enough. Our company will be conducting a full audit of all work this firm has done for us. In the meantime, I'm implementing a hold on all current projects." Porter paled further. "That's a $40 million account. You can't just—" "I can and I am." The CEO turned to me. "Ms. Kwan, I'd appreciate a meeting with you tomorrow regarding your future plans. As the meeting disbanded into chaos, security personnel arrived to escort Porter and Darian to clear their offices. I watched them leave, Darian's face twisted with rage, Porter's slack with shock. Imogen touched my arm. Ready for phase 2? I nodded, my heart racing with a mixture of vindication and uncertainty. The foundation was laid, but the real architecture of justice was just beginning. The story of what happened at the firm spread through the industry within days. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from former colleagues, competitors, journalists. I agreed to just one interview with the Architecture Innovation Journal, the same publication that had featured Anton Meyer's stolen design on its cover. The reporter Zane met me at a cafe near the riverfront, his recorder placed carefully between us. Let's start with the obvious question, he said after pleasantries. Why go public? You could have sued quietly, reached a settlement. I sipped my tea, considering, because it wasn't just about me. In preparing my case, we found at least 7 other designers, mostly women, mostly young, whose work had been appropriated in similar ways. Some never even knew. And the cleaning staff disguise? That seems extreme. That was Imogen's idea, I admitted. She's been investigating ethics violations in architecture firms for years. When I approached her with my suspicions, she suggested using her ongoing undercover operation to gather evidence. Convenient that she happened to be your mother's friend. I smiled thinly. Not convenient. Causal. My mother met Imogen 20 years ago when she experienced similar theft of her engineering patents. That's why I noticed the pattern so quickly. I'd grown up hearing about it. The article ran the following week, alongside an industry-wide survey revealing that 62% of junior designers had experienced some form of intellectual property theft. The state board announced formal investigations into 3 major firms, including Porter's. But victories rarely come without casualties. We appreciate your interest, said the hiring manager at the 4th firm I'd interviewed with. Your work is impressive, but given the current situation, we're concerned about potential complications. Translation: no one wanted to hire the whistleblower. 8 interviews, 8 rejections, each more polite than the last, but the message was clear. I had made powerful enemies. Though Porter and Darian were disgraced, their network remained intact. Whispers circulated that I was difficult, litigious, not a team player. My savings dwindled. The rent on my apartment, once a point of pride, became a source of anxiety. I began selling furniture, canceling subscriptions, calculating how many months I could survive without income. The hospital CEO had offered me a direct contract to complete my original design, but legal complications with the firm delayed the project indefinitely. Other potential clients expressed interest but hesitated to commit while litigation was ongoing. 6 months after the board meeting, I sat in my half-empty apartment, scrolling through job listings outside architecture. Maybe I could teach, or switch to interior design, or leave the field entirely. My phone rang. An unknown number. Is this Nira Kwan? A woman's voice, crisp and direct. Yes, speaking. This is June Reeves, Executive Director of the Architectural Justice Project. We're a new nonprofit addressing intellectual property theft and discrimination in design fields. Your case has been of particular interest to us. We'd like to offer you a position as our first creative director. I sat up straighter. I'm not familiar with your organization. We just received our funding. A group of industry leaders concerned about ethics violations provided our initial endowment. We need someone who understands the problem firsthand and has the courage to address it publicly. The position includes leading design, education programs, and consulting on reform initiatives. It sounded too perfect. After months of closed doors, suddenly a window? May I ask who recommended me? A slight pause. Several people, including Imogen Reed. But our primary advocate was Anton Meyer. My breath caught. Anton Meyer? The man who stole my designs? The man who was deceived into using your designs, she corrected. When the truth came out, he was horrified. He's returned the award and has been cooperating fully with investigators. He'd like to meet with you, actually. To apologize in person. My mind raced. Could this be legitimate? or an elaborate trap set by Porter and Darian to discredit me further. I agreed to meet both June and Anton the following day at the Architectural Justice Project's temporary office, a converted warehouse in the Arts District. I arrived early, circling the block twice before entering, half expecting to find Porter waiting inside. Instead, I found a bustling workspace. Designers and lawyers huddled around conference tables. Wall displays featured side-by-side comparisons of stolen designs and originals, including mine. June greeted me warmly. "Thank you for coming. Anton is waiting in the conference room." I followed her, heart pounding. Anton Meyer stood as I entered, tall, distinguished, his expression grave. "Ms. Kwan," he said, extending his hand, "I owe you an enormous apology." I shook his hand cautiously. "You claimed my work as your own." "I did," he acknowledged, gesturing for me to sit. Though not knowingly, Porter approached me claiming to represent your firm's collaborative output. He presented your designs as a joint project that the firm was willing to share with me as part of a larger partnership arrangement. "And you believed that? That a firm would just give away revolutionary designs?" Anton sighed heavily. In retrospect, it was suspiciously generous. But Porter and I had collaborated legitimately in the past. And the fee I paid, which I now know went entirely to him and Darian, seemed substantial. He slid a folder across the table. "These are the transfer records. I've provided everything to the investigators." I opened the folder. Bank statements showed payments totaling over $500,000. "They sold my work for $500,000? I whispered. "And I built my reputation on it," Anton said grimly, "which is why I'm committed to making this right. Not just for you, but for everyone this has happened to." June leaned forward. "The Architectural Justice Project isn't just about addressing past wrongs. It's about creating new systems to prevent future theft. We need someone with both design brilliance and ethical clarity to help lead that effort." I looked between them, my suspicion gradually giving way to cautious hope. What exactly would this role entail? Creating educational programs for design schools about intellectual property rights, consulting on technology to protect digital designs, and, June smiled, completing your hospital project as originally envisioned. The CEO has transferred the contract to us, and we'd like you to lead it, with full credit and creative control. It felt like standing on a precipice. After months of closed doors, here was not just an opening but an entirely new path. Yet something nagged at me. "This sounds incredible," I said carefully. "But I have to ask, why me? Surely there are more experienced architects who could lead this." Anton and June exchanged glances. "Because you didn't just fight back," June said. "You fought back in a way that exposed the entire system, not just your personal grievance. That's the perspective we need." I accepted the position the next day. Within weeks, the Architectural Justice Project became my new home. We established protocols for design protection, created resources for vulnerable young architects, and began the process of rebuilding my hospital design with a team of supportive colleagues. My career, which I'd thought destroyed, took on new dimension. I spoke at conferences, consulted with firms on ethical practices, and watched as the industry slowly began to change. But something still felt unfinished. Porter and Darian had been removed from the firm, their professional reputations damaged but not destroyed. The legal process dragged on, with their expensive attorneys filing motion after motion to delay proceedings. They had lost their positions but not their freedom, their wealth, or ultimately their connections. 6 months into my new role, I received a call from Imogen. "Porter's starting a new firm," she said without preamble. "Smaller, but backed by some loyal clients. Darian's joining him." My stomach tightened. How? After everything that came out? Money talks, and memories are short in this industry. They're claiming they've been vindicated because the criminal charges were reduced to civil penalties. I gripped the phone tighter. So they steal my designs, steal my award, nearly destroy my career, and get to start over? Unless someone stops them. Imogen said quietly. "The official investigation is winding down, but I've continued gathering information. There's more, Nira. Much more than we initially found." "What kind of information?" "The kind that doesn't just end careers. The kind that ends freedom." She paused. I need your help to complete the picture. Are you willing to take this further? I thought of all the nights I'd spent rebuilding my life, of the other designers whose work had been stolen, of how easily Porter and Darian might do this again to someone else. What do you need me to do? Imogen's plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would give Porter and Darian exactly what they wanted, a chance to steal from me again. Using my position at the Architectural Justice Project, I announced a revolutionary new security protocol for design protection, ADE, a digital watermarking system that could track any unauthorized use of architectural plans. The architecture blogs picked up the story immediately. Within days, I received an email from Porter. Congratulations on your new venture. Perhaps we could discuss potential collaboration? No hard feelings about past misunderstandings. No hard feelings. As if he hadn't systematically stolen my work, sabotaged my career, and treated me as disposable. I agreed to meet at his new office, a modest space compared to his former domain, but still featuring the sleek, expensive furniture he preferred. Darian was there too, his smile tight and artificial. Nira, Porter greeted me expansively. You're looking well. This new project of yours sounds fascinating. I placed my tablet on the table, watching their eyes track it hungrily. It's revolutionary. A completely secure way to protect intellectual property. Once implemented industry-wide, design theft would become impossible. Ambitious, Darian commented. But is it market-ready? These systems often have vulnerabilities. See for yourself, I said, opening a file showing a new museum design. A structure of interlocking curves and suspended gardens that took my hospital concept even further. This is protected by our beta system. Even if someone copied these files, the watermarks would reveal the source. Porter leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Impressive, very impressive. Would you consider an investment partner? Your technology paired with our client connections could be quite lucrative. I might, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. I'll need to discuss it with my team, but I could leave this demonstration file with you to review the technical specifications. That would be helpful, Darian said quickly. Too quickly. I stood to leave. Just don't share it outside your office, please. The security features are still proprietary. Of course not, Porter assured me. We understand the value of intellectual property better than most. As I walked out, I felt their eyes on my back. I had laid the bait. Now we would wait for them to take it. 1 week later, I received an urgent call from June. It happened, she said. Just as you predicted. Someone accessed your demonstration file and tried to remove the watermarks. They then sent modified versions to 3 different developers. My heart raced. Were you able to trace it? Directly to Porter's IP address. The system captured everything. The download, the attempted modifications, the transmission to other parties, and because they agreed in writing not to share the file, it constitutes both copyright infringement and breach of contract. What about the other component? June's voice lowered. Imogen's team found it. The financial records were hidden behind shell companies, but the trail is clear. Porter and Darian weren't just stealing designs. They were laundering money for several development projects. When they sold your hospital design to Anton, the payments went through the same channels they'd been using for years. I closed my eyes, relief washing through me. So, it's over? Almost, June said. But there's one more piece to put in place. Are you ready? I thought of all the nights I'd lain awake, replaying the humiliation of that award ceremony, of standing alone while my designs were celebrated under someone else's name, of watching Porter and Darian nearly escape consequences. I'm ready. 3 days later, Porter and Darian were arrested, not just for intellectual property theft, but for financial crimes that spanned a decade. The industry publications that had once celebrated Anton's stolen design now featured Porter's and Darian's mugshots. But even as I watched the news reports, something felt incomplete. They would face justice, yes. But what about my moment? The recognition that had been stolen from me? That evening, I received an invitation that made my hands shake. The Innovation Awards Committee was holding a special ceremony. A ceremony to publicly rescind Anton's award and present it to its rightful recipient. And they wanted me to attend. I stood in my apartment, holding the invitation, remembering the last time I'd prepared for this ceremony, how I'd stood in the same spot, reading Porter's cancellation text, how I'd gone alone, only to watch my stolen work celebrated. This time would be different. This time, justice would have its day. But as I began planning what to wear, what to say, a notification appeared on my phone, breaking news from the architecture world. Porter and Darian had been released on bail, and their attorney had made a statement. My clients categorically deny all charges and look forward to being fully exonerated. We have evidence that Ms. Kwan deliberately entrapped them as part of a vindictive campaign to destroy their reputations. We will be filing countercharges immediately. My stomach dropped. Could they actually escape again? Turn this around and make me the villain? As I stared at the screen in disbelief, my phone rang. Imogen, don't panic, she said immediately. This is exactly what we expected. It's their last desperate move. But what if it works? What if people believe them? They won't, Imogen said with absolute certainty. Because tomorrow at the award ceremony, we're revealing the final piece of evidence. The piece that will make sure they never work in this industry, or any industry, again. What evidence? I thought we'd found everything. Not everything, Imogen said. There's one last revelation, and it changes everything. The award ceremony was held at the same venue as the original, the Grand Pavilion, with its soaring glass ceiling and dramatic lighting. But this time, as I entered, people noticed. Conversations paused. Heads turned. There she is, someone whispered loudly enough for me to hear. The architect who brought down Porter and Darian. I wore a structured emerald dress, not the midnight blue gown from before. This wasn't a continuation of that night. It was a reclamation, a beginning rather than an ending. Anton Meyer approached immediately, extending his hand. Ms. Kwan, thank you for coming. I know this can't erase what happened, but I hope it helps set things right. The ceremony itself was smaller than the original awards, focused solely on the Innovation Award correction. Industry leaders filled the first rows, with press lining the back wall. As I took my seat in the front row, I noticed a reserved section cordoned off with velvet ropes. The placard read simply, "Special guests." The lights dimmed. The committee chairperson took the stage. "We gather tonight to correct a grievous error," she began. "The Innovation Award celebrates not just creativity, but integrity and architectural vision. Last year, that integrity was compromised." She detailed the investigation findings, how my designs had been stolen, how the nomination had been withdrawn under false pretenses, how the award had gone to work that was fundamentally mine. "But tonight is about more than correcting a single mistake," she continued. "It's about addressing a pattern of behavior that has damaged our profession and hurt countless talented architects." The chairperson gestured to the side entrance, where Imogen stood with a small group of people I didn't recognize, 3 women and 2 men, ranging in age from mid-20s to early 50s. These are just a few of the architects whose work was appropriated by Porter and Darian over the past 15 years, the chairperson explained. Their stories mirror Ms. Kwan's in disturbing ways. Designs stolen, credit reassigned, careers derailed. My breath caught. I knew there had been others, but seeing them, these strangers united by the same betrayal I'd experienced, made it viscerally real. But the story doesn't end with theft. The chairperson continued, her voice hardening. When these architects raised concerns, they were systematically silenced through intimidation, harassment, and blacklisting. The screens around the hall lit up with email exchanges, text messages, internal memos, all documenting a coordinated campaign to discredit anyone who questioned Porter's or Darian's actions. What many of you don't know is that 2 days ago, Porter and Darian attempted to continue this pattern with Ms. Kwan. After being released on bail, they sent her this. The central screen displayed a message that made my stomach clench. "Drop the charges or we release the personal photographs. You know the ones. Your choice if you want to be known for your architecture or your indiscretions." Murmurs rippled through the audience. The chairperson raised her hand for silence. There were no photographs. There were no indiscretions. This was a fabrication designed to frighten Miss Kwan into silence, the same tactic they've used against others. But this time, they made a critical mistake. The door at the back of the hall opened. Security personnel entered, escorting two figures in handcuffs. Porter and Darian, ashen-faced and disheveled, were led to the reserved section. "Mr. Porter and Mr. Darian are here tonight by court order," the chairperson explained. The threatening message they sent violated the terms of their bail. But more importantly, it was sent through a messaging system developed by the Architectural Justice Project, ISEM, a system designed to capture evidence of exactly this kind of intimidation. I turned to see Porter staring straight ahead, jaw clenched. Darian's eyes darted around the room, as if still searching for escape. The evidence gathered through this system revealed something even more disturbing than we initially understood, the chairperson continued. The full scope of their activities extended beyond design theft to systematic blackmail, fraudulent billing practices, and even sabotage of competing projects that threatened structural integrity. The screens displayed construction site photographs, annotated with safety violations that had been deliberately concealed, potential catastrophes waiting to happen. Lives were put at risk, the chairperson said gravely, and for that reason, the charges have been escalated from civil to criminal, with no possibility of further bail. The audience sat in stunned silence. These weren't just career crimes. They were actions that could have resulted in physical harm, or worse. But tonight isn't about dwelling on corruption, the chairperson said, her tone softening. It's about recognizing innovation that was nearly lost, about restoring credit where it belongs. She turned toward me. "Nira Kwan, would you please join me on stage?" My legs felt unsteady as I rose and walked the few steps to the podium. The lights seemed brighter than before, the audience more attentive. The Innovation Award celebrates architectural vision that transforms how we experience space, the chairperson said, echoing the words from the original ceremony. For revolutionary healthcare design concepts that reimagine healing environments, the award rightfully belongs to Nira Kwan. She placed the award in my hands, a crystal sculpture representing interlocking forms rising toward the sky. The weight of it felt simultaneously substantial and lighter than I'd imagined. As I stepped to the microphone, I found myself looking not at Porter and Darian, but at the other architects who had been victimized, the ones who hadn't received this moment of vindication. "This award recognizes a design that reimagines healing spaces," I began. "But today, I'm thinking about another kind of healing, the kind that happens when truth replaces deception, when systems that protect wrongdoers are dismantled, when those who were silenced find their voices again." I gestured toward the other architects. "For every designer who has seen their work stolen, their contributions minimized, their careers threatened, this moment belongs to you as well. Your creativity wasn't diminished by what was done to you. It persists in everything you design, in every space you transform." My gaze shifted to Porter and Darian, to those who mistake power for talent, who build careers by taking rather than creating. Your time is ending, not just in architecture, but in every field where creativity is currency. I looked back at the audience. This award represents more than a single design. It represents a commitment, my commitment, to creating spaces where healing happens, where light reaches dark corners, where structures protect rather than threaten those inside them. I raised the award slightly. I accept this not just for myself, but for everyone working to build a more honest profession. Thank you. The applause began slowly, then built to a sustained ovation. As I returned to my seat, I caught Imogen's eye. She nodded once, a gesture that contained both approval and something more profound, the consignation of a battle well fought. After the ceremony, journalists swarmed, their questions overlapping. How does it feel to finally receive recognition? What will happen to the hospital project now? Did you know about the structural safety issues? I answered each question calmly, focusing on the future rather than recriminations. As the crowd thinned, Anton approached again, this time with June and Imogen. "The developers who received your stolen designs have asked to meet with you," June said. "They're interested in commissioning original work, with proper credit and compensation." I raised an eyebrow. "Are they afraid of being implicated?" "Probably," Imogen admitted. "But it's also an opportunity to establish new standards for how architectural work is commissioned and credited. We've prepared contracts that could serve as industry templates." Anton added. Complete transparency in design origin, clear attribution requirements, enhanced compensation structures for innovative concepts. I considered this as we walked toward the exit. Porter and Darian had already been escorted out, back to detention while awaiting trial for charges far more serious than I'd initially imagined. There's something else you should know, Imogen said quietly. The investigation revealed that Porter's firm wasn't the only one engaged in these practices. 3 other major firms have been implicated, with patterns dating back decades. My stomach tightened. How widespread is this? Widespread enough that the licensing board is creating a special task force, June replied. They've asked if you'd be willing to serve as a consultant. We paused at the entrance, where photographers waited to capture departing attendees. Through the glass doors, I could see city lights reflecting off the river beyond, a tapestry of illumination against darkness. What you started isn't just about your designs anymore, Imogen said. It's about restructuring how creativity is protected in an entire industry. I thought about the younger architects who would come after me, those with revolutionary visions and unconventional approaches. How many might have been silenced before they could transform our built environment? How many innovations lost because their creators were pushed out or appropriated? I'll help, I said finally, but on one condition, that we focus not just on punishment, but on prevention, on creating systems where this can't happen again. June smiled. That's exactly what we hoped you'd say. 1 year later, I stood at the entrance to the newly completed children's hospital, my design fully realized, with gardens growing through structural elements and light channels that followed healing rhythms. Patients and their families had already begun moving in, their faces showing the wonder I'd hoped to create. Porter and Darian were serving prison sentences, not just for design theft, but for fraud, blackmail, and criminal negligence related to the construction safety violations. The other architects whose work they'd stolen had received settlements and, more importantly, public recognition of their contributions. The Architectural Justice Project had expanded to 5 cities, with programs specifically supporting young designers from underrepresented backgrounds. The security system we'd developed to catch Porter and Darian had evolved into standard industry practice, protecting digital designs from unauthorized use. As I walked through the central atrium, a soaring space where trees grew toward the glass ceiling, I noticed a young woman sketching on a tablet. Her designs showed curved structures unlike anything in conventional architecture. That's an interesting approach, I said, pausing beside her. She looked up, recognition dawning. You're Nira Kwan. Your work is why I wanted to become an architect. What are you designing? I asked. It's probably too experimental, she said, hesitating before turning the tablet toward me. Floating structures that respond to weather patterns. My professors say it's impractical. I studied her design, bold, unconventional, brilliant in its conceptual approach. There was a time when gardens growing through buildings seemed impractical too, I told her. The Architectural Justice Project has an internship program for innovative thinkers. You should apply. Her face brightened. Really? You think my ideas have potential? I know they do, I said. And more importantly, I know they'll remain yours. I continued my tour of the hospital, watching how patients interacted with the spaces I'd designed. A young boy in a wheelchair navigated easily along curved pathways. A teenage girl sat in a garden nook, sunlight falling across her book through precisely angled light channels. A doctor conferred with parents in a consultation space designed to feel protective rather than clinical. This was the true victory, not the award on my office shelf or even the downfall of those who had wronged me, but the creation of spaces that changed how people experienced their most vulnerable moments. My phone buzzed with a message from Imogen. Board meeting in an hour. The new ethics standards are ready for final review. I texted back confirmation, then paused for one last look at the central atrium. From this vantage point, I could see how all the elements worked together: light, structure, nature, and human movement in perfect harmony. Porter had once told me my designs were too specialized for commercial success. Darian had dismissed them as experiments rather than practical architecture. They had tried to steal what they couldn't create themselves, to claim vision they didn't possess. But vision, once released into the world, can't truly be contained or controlled. It spreads, influences, transforms. What they had tried to take from me had only grown stronger, reaching beyond a single building or award to change an entire profession. I smiled at the thought as I walked toward the exit, already planning my next design. If you've ever had your work stolen or been pushed aside while others took credit for your ideas, I hope this story resonated with you. Sometimes justice takes time, but truth eventually finds its way to the surface. Drop a comment about your own experiences with workplace justice. Hit subscribe for more stories about women who refuse to be silenced, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that their creativity matters and deserves protection. Remember, your vision is yours alone, and no one can truly take what makes you exceptional. The sky outside was gray as Wendy sat across from Elaine's immaculate desk, watching her boss flip through the promotion application with practiced disinterest. 5 years of sacrificed weekends, missed family dinners, and endless overtime hours condensed into a 20-page portfolio that Elaine barely glanced at before setting it aside. "I appreciate your enthusiasm," Elaine said, adjusting her designer glasses, "but I've reviewed your application thoroughly, and while your work has been adequate, I don't believe you're qualified for senior management, perhaps in another year or two." Adequate. The word dropped between them like a stone. "I maintained the department's highest client satisfaction ratings. I personally saved the Lawford account when everyone else had written it off. I haven't taken a full weekend off in 3 years." But I only smiled and nodded, the practiced expression I'd perfected in corporate America. "I understand. Thank you for the feedback. I'm glad we're on the same page," Elaine replied, already checking her watch. "The Ellison proposal needs your attention today. They've requested additional metrics before signing." As I gathered my things, Elaine was already typing an email, my career disappointment already forgotten. I walked past the corner office that should have been mine, with its window view and glass door where my name belonged. In the parking garage, I sat in my car and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't sad or even angry. She looked calculating. I started the engine and made 2 decisions that would change everything. I would cancel my upcoming vacation, and I would stop writing my daily operational guides. No one at the office knew it yet, but their perfect system was about to crash without its invisible support beam. Before I tell you what happened next, you might be wondering why so many people feel stuck in careers where they're undervalued. If my story resonates with you, make sure to like and subscribe. I share a new career strategy every week that might just change your professional life. Now, back to what happened after that meeting. My name is Amelia Carlton, and until that meeting, I was the most reliable employee at Meridian Solutions. Not the most visible or the highest paid, but the one who kept everything running while others took credit. I'm methodical by nature, with an almost photographic memory for systems and processes. Growing up with 4 younger siblings taught me to solve problems before they exploded, a skill that transferred perfectly to corporate life. When I joined the company 5 years ago, I'd inherited a catastrophic mess. The previous team leader had departed abruptly after a disagreement with management, taking all procedural knowledge with them. No documentation, no transition notes, not even passwords to critical systems. The department was in chaos. Clients were threatening to leave, and nobody knew how to fix it. I spent 3 months reverse engineering every workflow, staying until midnight decoding spreadsheets and reconstructing client histories. I created detailed guides for every process, color-coded, indexed, and meticulously organized. My boss Elaine never bothered to learn these systems. Why would she when I handled everything so smoothly? "You're a natural problem solver," she'd say during my performance reviews, always followed by a modest raise that never matched my contributions. The company had recently landed a contract with Ellison Enterprises, a major client worth millions in annual revenue. I'd built that relationship from nothing, staying late to accommodate their overseas time zone and learning their industry thoroughly. Elaine had attended exactly 3 meetings, mostly to claim credit during quarterly executive reviews. Each morning, I arrived at 7:30 in the morning to prepare briefing notes for Elaine before her 9 o'clock management meeting. Each evening, I sent comprehensive updates on all active projects. In between, I put out fires before anyone noticed smoke. The morning after my rejected promotion, something changed inside me. I arrived at exactly 9 o'clock. Not 7:30, not 8:45, exactly 9. I drafted no briefing notes. I answered emails directly addressed to me and ignored the rest. When a crisis erupted with a supplier, I directed it to the appropriate department instead of solving it myself as usual. By lunch, 3 people had stopped by my desk with confused expressions. "Amelia, did you see the thread about the Lawford scheduling conflict?" asked Peter from accounts. "Yes," I replied, continuing to type. He waited for more, shifting awkwardly when nothing came. "So, can you fix it like you usually do?" I looked up from my screen. "That's actually under procurement scope. I forwarded it to Diane." His eyebrows rose slightly. "But you always handle these things." "I've been advised to focus more on my assigned responsibilities," I said with a small smile. "I'm trying to demonstrate that I understand my proper place in the organization." By 5 p.m., I packed up my belongings and left. No extra hours, no taking work home. On my drive, I canceled the cabin reservation for my upcoming vacation, the first real break I'd planned in 3 years. Instead, I would be present for the system's inevitable collapse. That evening, my phone buzzed with work notifications. I silenced it and spent time with my daughter Elena, baking chocolate chip cookies, something I hadn't done in months. As we laughed over misshapen cookie dough, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. "Mom, why are you home early?" Elena asked, licking batter from a spoon. I paused, considering how to explain corporate politics to a 10-year-old. "I decided my time was valuable, honey, and I wanted to spend more of it with you." She beamed. "Can we do this tomorrow too?" "Absolutely," I promised, ignoring the phone vibrating insistently on the counter. By the next morning, cracks were showing at work. The Ellison client had requested urgent changes to their implementation plan, changes only I understood how to make. Elaine attempted to lead the response team but quickly became overwhelmed without my usual detailed briefings. "Where are the process notes for the Ellison customizations?" she demanded, appearing at my desk at 10:30. "They're in the shared drive," I replied pleasantly. "Under client implementations. I mentioned it in last month's department meeting. There are hundreds of files there. Which one specifically?" I pulled up the folder on my screen. The master document is called Ellison Enterprise Integration, Complete Process Documentation. It's organized by module with tabbed sections. Elaine stared at the 200-page document with barely concealed horror. "Can you just handle this directly? The client is waiting." "I'd be happy to," I replied, "but I have the quarterly compliance review this afternoon. I can get to Ellison first thing tomorrow morning." Her face tightened. "This can't wait until tomorrow." "I understand. Would you like me to reschedule the compliance review? It's due to the regulators by end of day." She left without answering, her heels clicking aggressively down the hallway. That evening, I turned off all work notifications and took Elena to the park. My personal phone remained silent beside me on the bench as I watched her on the swings, her laughter carrying across the playground. For the first time in years, I was fully present in my personal life. When we returned home, I checked my work phone once. 79 missed calls from various work numbers. Voicemails ranged from confused to desperate to furious. The Ellison team was threatening to pull their contract. 3 systems had developed unexpected issues, all documented in my guides, which nobody had bothered to read. The quarterly compliance report due to regulators was still incomplete. I set the phone down and slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I arrived at precisely 9 o'clock in the morning again. The office atmosphere had transformed overnight. Harried colleagues rushed between meeting rooms. Elaine was visible through her office glass, gesturing frantically on a video call. The regional director's assistant was pacing by the elevator banks. I settled at my desk and methodically organized my tasks for the day. "Where have you been?" Peter hissed, appearing beside me with wild eyes. "Everything's falling apart. Elaine's been trying to reach you since yesterday afternoon." "I left at 5 o'clock, I replied calmly. "My work hours are 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, as specified in my contract." "But the Ellison crisis, what about it?" His mouth opened and closed. They're threatening to walk. Nobody can figure out how to implement the changes they need. I nodded thoughtfully. That process requires special handling. It's all documented in the guide I created last year. Nobody can make sense of your documentation without you explaining it, he almost shouted. Before I could respond, Elaine's assistant appeared. Amelia, emergency meeting in the conference room, now. I gathered a notebook and pen, walking unhurriedly to the conference room where Elaine sat with the regional director, Byron Wallace. Their faces were grim, folders spread across the table. Amelia, Byron said, relief evident in his voice. Thank goodness. We need your help with this Ellison situation immediately. I sat down and placed my notebook on the table. Of course, how can I assist? Elaine's face was tight with controlled fury. Let's cut to the chase. What will it take for you to fix this? The promotion? It's yours. I tilted my head slightly. That's a generous offer, but I've been contacted by a competitor. They've offered me a senior management position with a substantial salary increase. Apparently, they believe I'm qualified. The room went silent. Byron's eyes widened while Elaine's narrowed dangerously. You're leaving? Byron asked. When? I haven't accepted their offer yet, I replied. I was taking time to consider my options. Name your price, Byron said immediately. Whatever they're offering, we'll match it. I smiled politely. It's not just about compensation. It's about recognition, respect, and opportunity. The Ellison client specifically asked for you by name, Elaine interjected. You can't possibly leave now. Interesting, I said. So did 4 others in the past month. I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. Here's my 2 weeks' notice. I'll help with the transition as my contract requires. Elaine reached for the folder, but Byron was faster. He opened it, scanned the contents, then closed it decisively. This won't be necessary, he said firmly. Amelia, I'd like to speak with you privately in my office. As I stood to follow him, Elaine remained seated, her knuckles white against the polished table. The company's response to my resignation was about to reveal exactly how much they had undervalued me all along, and what they were willing to do to keep me now that they understood my true worth. I followed Byron to his corner office, aware of the curious glances from colleagues as we passed. His space was minimalist, but impressive. Awards and industry recognitions lined one wall, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. He gestured for me to sit in the chair across from his desk. I've been watching your contributions for some time, Byron said, folding his hands on his desk, though apparently not closely enough. I remained silent, letting him continue. The situation with Elaine concerns me, he admitted. This is the first I'm hearing about your promotion being denied. Why didn't you come to me directly? Chain of command, I replied simply. Elaine is my supervisor. Going over her head would have been inappropriate. He nodded slowly. Admirable, but perhaps misguided in this case. Tell me honestly, what would it take to keep you here? I considered my words carefully. Recognition of my actual contributions, appropriate compensation, and a position where I can implement the strategies I've developed instead of just executing someone else's vision. Byron studied me for a long moment. I'm creating a new position, Director of Operational Systems, reporting directly to me. Double your current salary, full remote flexibility 3 days a week, and authority over departmental workflow design. The position is yours if you want it. I didn't respond immediately, which seemed to surprise him. Is that not sufficient? He asked. It's very generous, I acknowledged, but I need to be clear about something. I'm not using a competing offer as leverage. There really is another company waiting for my decision. Byron leaned back. What can they offer that we can't match or exceed? A fresh start, I said honestly. No history of being overlooked. No colleagues who see me as support staff rather than leadership. Fair point, he conceded. But consider this. You've built systems here that you understand intimately. You've cultivated client relationships that trust you. Starting over means rebuilding all of that from scratch. He was right, of course. 5 years of institutional knowledge wasn't easily replaced, but neither was the feeling of being consistently undervalued. I'll need some time to consider, I said finally. Of course, take the weekend, but I need an answer by Monday morning. He stood, signaling the end of our meeting. And Amelia, I'd appreciate if you could help stabilize the Ellison situation before you make any final decisions. I nodded. I'll handle Ellison personally today. When I returned to my desk, an email from Byron was already waiting, outlining the new position offer in writing. The salary figure made me blink twice. It was more than double what I currently earned. The job description could have been written specifically for my skill set. I was gathering materials for the Ellison call when Elaine appeared beside my desk, her expression carefully neutral. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "Not here. Lunch?" "I have the Ellison call at noon," I replied. "After that then, my office at 2. I nodded, already turning my attention to the crisis at hand. The Ellison team was frustrated but relieved when I joined the call. Their demands were reasonable. They needed customizations that would normally take weeks implemented within days. I walked them through a phased approach that would prioritize their most critical needs while building toward their complete vision. "This is exactly why we wanted to work with your company," their director said. "You understand our business needs, not just technical specifications." After the call, I documented the solution in clear steps and sent it to the implementation team with explicit instructions. Normally, I would have handled every aspect myself, but today I delegated appropriately, making myself available for questions, but not taking ownership of the execution. At 2 o'clock, I knocked on Elaine's door. She looked different, smaller somehow, with dark circles under her eyes, suggesting a sleepless night. "Close the door," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "I understand Byron offered you a new position." "He did," I confirmed. She nodded slowly. "I won't pretend to be happy about it, but I understand why he did it. You're valuable to the company." I waited, sensing there was more. "I owe you an apology," she continued, the words seemingly difficult for her. "I've relied on your competence without appropriately acknowledging it or rewarding it." "May I ask you something?" I said, genuinely curious. "When you said I wasn't qualified for senior management, what specifically did you think I was lacking?" Elaine shifted uncomfortably. "You've always been more technical, the behind-the-scenes problem solver. Senior management requires visibility, presence, political savvy. In other words, I do the work while others take the spotlight." She had the grace to look embarrassed. "That's oversimplifying." "Is it?" I asked. "The Ellison contract who presented the winning strategy to the executive team." "I did, but based on the proposal I developed, the client retention initiative last quarter that saved 4 major accounts, who received the leadership award? That was a team effort. A team I led, coordinated, and created all materials for." I leaned forward slightly. "I'm not lacking qualifications, Elaine. I've simply allowed others to stand on my shoulders while remaining invisible." The silence between us stretched uncomfortably. "Are you taking Byron's offer?" she finally asked. "I haven't decided. If you stay," she said carefully, "things will be different between us." "Yes," I agreed. "They will." The weekend gave me time to think clearly away from office politics. I took Elena to the Science Museum on Saturday, something I'd been promising for months, but never found time for. On Sunday, I called my sister for advice. "What does your gut tell you?" she asked after I explained the situation. "That I've outgrown the box they put me in," I replied. "But I'm not sure if Byron's offer changes that or just makes the box more comfortable." "Would you be reporting to Elaine in this new role?" "No, directly to Byron." "And what happens to Elaine?" It was a good question. Byron didn't say specifically, but reading between the lines, I think her position is being reconsidered. My sister was quiet for a moment. "So your options are to take a fresh start elsewhere, or accept a promotion that might result in your former boss being demoted?" Put that way, the choice felt different. "I don't want revenge against Elaine," I said slowly. "I just want recognition for my work." "Are you sure about that?" my sister challenged. "Because from what you've told me, part of you would enjoy seeing her face the consequences of underestimating you." Her words hit uncomfortably close to home. Was that what I wanted? To see Elaine humbled? To watch her realize how much she'd depended on me while simultaneously dismissing my contributions? By Monday morning, I had made my decision. I arrived early, 7:30 a.m., my old starting time, and went directly to Byron's office. His assistant wasn't at her desk yet, but his door was open. "You're early," he noted, looking up from his computer. "I wanted to give you my answer before the day gets busy," I explained, taking the seat across from him. "And? I'm accepting your offer with 2 conditions." His eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm listening." "First, I want to build my own team. Full hiring authority for 3 positions that I believe are essential." Byron nodded. "Reasonable? And the second?" "Elaine remains in her current position." This clearly surprised him. "After how she treated you? Why?" "Because replacing her doesn't solve the structural problems in how the department functions. And because I don't want my first leadership act to be perceived as revenge." He studied me with new interest. "That's unexpected and politically astute." "I've learned a few things watching from the sidelines," I replied. "Very well. Elaine stays, though her department will now coordinate through your office for operational matters." "Thank you." "No, Amelia," Byron said, extending his hand. "Thank you for staying. The announcement will go out this morning. I suggest you prepare for quite a bit of reaction." He wasn't wrong. The company-wide email went out at 10 a.m., announcing my new position and outlining my expanded responsibilities. My inbox immediately flooded with congratulations, questions, and meeting requests. Peter stopped by my desk, looking somewhat sheepish. "So, you'll be my boss now?" "Technically, yes," I confirmed. "Is that going to be a problem?" He shook his head quickly. No, it's great. You've always been the one who actually knows what's happening anyway." Throughout the day, colleagues who had barely acknowledged me previously suddenly found reasons to introduce themselves. Administrative assistants who had always been kind to me now smiled with a hint of conspiracy. They understood better than anyone how invisible work kept the company running. Elaine avoided me until late afternoon, when she appeared at my desk with a folder. "The quarterly strategy document," she said stiffly. "Since operational planning now falls under your purview, you'll need to present this at the executive meeting tomorrow." I accepted the folder. "Thank you. I'll review it tonight." She turned to leave, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, I didn't recommend against your promotion because I thought you were incapable. I did it because I couldn't afford to lose you from my team." It was perhaps the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. "That's the fundamental problem, isn't it?" I replied. "Good managers develop their people even when it means letting them move on." She nodded once, sharply, and walked away. That evening, I stayed late reorganizing my workspace for my new role. Byron stopped by on his way out. "Still here? I thought you'd be celebrating." I smiled. "I'll celebrate this weekend. Right now, I'm planning." "Planning what?" "How to make sure no one else in this company is overlooked the way I was." I handed him a document I'd been working on. "This is my proposed structure for the new department, including training programs to identify internal talent and systematically develop it." He flipped through the pages, eyebrows rising. "You developed all this today?" "No," I admitted. "I've been refining it for about 2 years. I just never had the authority to implement it." Byron shook his head, looking impressed. "Remind me never to underestimate you, Amelia." "That's the plan," I replied with a smile. 3 months later, the transformation was well underway. My new team included a brilliant systems analyst who had been buried in IT support and a process developer who had been miscast as an administrative assistant. Together, we streamlined operations across 4 departments, reducing overtime by 40% while increasing productivity metrics. Elaine and I developed a professional working relationship. It wasn't friendly exactly, but it was respectful. She excelled at client-facing interactions, once freed from operational details she had never fully grasped. In an unexpected development, the division's employee satisfaction scores improved dramatically. The Ellison contract expanded to include 2 additional service lines, specifically requesting my new team's involvement in the implementation. Their CEO personally called Byron to commend the company's remarkable turnaround in operational excellence. On a Friday afternoon, 6 months after my non-promotion, I left the office at 5 p.m., a habit I had maintained despite my increased responsibilities. Elena was waiting when I got home, homework spread across the kitchen table. "How was work, Mom?" she asked, looking up from her math problems. "Productive," I replied, setting down my laptop bag. "The new training program launched today. 25 employees will get development opportunities they wouldn't have had before." "Like you didn't get?" "Children see more than we realize." "Yes, exactly like that." She considered this for a moment. "That's a nice way to fix things. Instead of getting mad, you're making it better for other people." I smiled, recognizing the wisdom in her observation. Sometimes the best response to being undervalued isn't anger. It's demonstrating your true worth so clearly that it can never be questioned again. That evening, as Elena slept and I reviewed presentations for Monday's executive meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from Byron. "Board approved your promotion to VP level. Effective next month. Unanimous vote. Elaine actually gave the strongest recommendation. Congratulations." I set the phone down, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. This wasn't about winning or revenge. It was about finally being seen, truly seen, for what I had always been capable of doing. The corner office with my name on the door was nice, but it wasn't the victory. The victory was changing a system that had failed not just me, but countless others whose quiet competence went unrecognized. The victory was creating paths for others to rise without having to become invisible first. Sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated isn't proving others wrong. It's creating a world where talent can no longer be ignored, no matter how quietly it performs. If you've ever felt invisible in your workplace despite carrying more than your share, I hope my story gives you courage. The skills that make you indispensable are the same ones that qualify you for leadership. Don't wait for others to recognize your value. Demonstrate it so clearly that denying it becomes impossible. And if you found something valuable in this story, please like and subscribe for more strategies on transforming workplace dynamics. Remember, your worth isn't determined by others' inability to see it. It's defined by your impact, whether acknowledged or not.